Pick up a donation
What donation?
from Toromont.
What is it?
I think it's like $555. They did like a furniture something. I don't know. It said to us. And they went on Arthur wants to do like a check presentation on Monday for $1,000.
Great. So I'm gonna pick up this cereal for Mark at 2:45,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna do a count. But if you could let me know, like I put in my order with Nick on Friday.
Okay. You want to just give Michael a call?
And just see if he can get 120. And then would he pick it up and then we pick it up from them?
I don't know. We picked it up last time.
From RTA?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll call you. Aaron? Oh, you're in the bathroom? Oh, I thought you were in your room. Oh, wait. Pardon? If it was your kids, your door would be open and the kids would already be in there.
Hi, Erin.
Yeah. What vehicle are you doing right now?
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Good. You go by Jonathan or John?
Mostly Jonathan, I guess.
Okay, sounds
or
good.
John. Doesn't matter.
Okay, no, that's good. I just like to check. Laura, is that you calling in? Can you hear me?
I can, and yes, it is. Hello, thanks for the phone number.
Yeah, good. I'm glad it worked. You know what, I'm remembering I need to plug in. This computer's volume doesn't go very high, so I use an external speaker when I remember. We still have a couple of minutes to let people get logged in, so we'll just hold off for a few minutes here.
Yeah, I'm just going to review then quietly. Just let me know when I guess I'll just hear when we get started, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Jonathan, can you remind me, you're in Sault Ste. Marie?
Yes.
Yes. Who are you connected with?
The People's Garden.
The People's Garden.
Yeah,
Okay.
at Algoma University.
Okay, and what's your role there?
So I'm the People's Garden coordinator.
Okay, perfect.
Hey, Jonathan, nice to hear your voice.
Hello, Laura. How's it going?
Pretty good. How about you?
Oh, doing good, doing good.
All right.
Awesome. Lita, can you, I know you muted yourself, it looks like, but can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect, good. Thanks for joining. And Erin, just to check, can you hear us as well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome, perfect. Okay, well, I have 1 o'clock, but let's just give people another minute or two to figure out Zoom and see if they're gonna join us. It's always, never quite sure. I'm hoping someone from Duluth will join us this time. I only had 1 sent regret, but we'll see. So yeah, Laura, you probably can't see anything. So just so I have some questions prepped, but since there's just a few of us, oh, Charles is joining as well. And Kristen at the same time. How exciting. Charles, can you hear us okay?
Yep, can you hear me? Hi.
Yep, and we can see you. Excellent. Kristen, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Is our presenter on?
Yes, Laura is here. She's here on the phone though, just because of the way her internet was working. So she's calling in and is gonna lead us in a discussion that way.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Charles. Hi.
I'm so sad I'm not there. We're Rachel, or I was supposed to be there, right? Not Rachel.
I know.
Yeah, we were supposed to have lunch or something.
I know. I was actually, I spent a whole bunch of time crossing things out of my calendar, and I actually didn't cross this off. And actually, Kristen was supposed to be with us, because Kristen and I were supposed to be down in Sault Ste. Marie right now. But anyway,
I know.
obviously that's what happened.
I know. I was thinking about that yesterday. We had this whole, anyway, I know. It's whole thing planned, right?
Well, we're glad we can connect this way at least.
Yeah.
Bummer not to be in person though, for sure. Lindsay, can you hear us okay? Hopefully. I see you're muted, so.
Yes, I can hear you. Wonderful.
Perfect, great. Well, okay, we're a few minutes in here, so if people join us, that's great. So last time we did introductions and it took a little while to get through everybody, but it was good to connect. So I did have the idea of this time instead, and I don't know if everyone's going to be excited about this idea because you need your cameras on, but we could ask questions and then you could just raise your hand to see if they apply to you or not. And then we could just kind of buzz through an introduction that way and find out briefly a little bit more about people. So if you're cool to have your camera on, I know Laura, you won't be able to. So Laura, you'll have to, hello everybody. Laura can just say I or something like that. Say me. So let's just do a quick run through. And if it applies to you, go ahead and raise your hand. So who is from Thunder Bay or who's living in Thunder Bay? Okay, who's from Duluth? I did live there, but I don't anymore. We don't have anyone with us from Duluth today. That's all right. Who's from Sault Ste. Marie? Two. Technically, Laura too. Okay, good. Who works, you can judge these for yourself, primarily with food?
I do.
Okay, primarily with energy and climate. Okay. Who primarily with wellness, health and wellness? Sort of, yeah, I guess I'm in it, so I should do that. Who does interdisciplinary work?
I do.
That's everybody. Okay, and who teaches in any form of teaching?
I do.
That's okay. Research, any form of research?
Yep.
Okay, good. Community outreach?
Yep.
Just, that's everybody. Okay, let's see. Who has a pet?
Yep.
Okay, who's got a kiddo or kiddos?
Yep.
Some of them even in the video. Awesome. Okay, and who is drinking coffee right now? Only two. Okay, who's drinking tea? Two. And anybody drinking anything else? I have water. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to throw some fun ones in. Awesome. Okay, I think we can see everybody's names, but Laura, I will say them out loud so you can hear the names of who's on the call. Would that be helpful?
Sure.
Okay, so we've got Jonathan, who it sounds like you know from People's Garden. Did I say that right? People's Garden?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Myself, Charles Levko, Kristen Lowett, Lita McKellar, Lindsay Galway, and Aaron Stevens. So at this point, Laura, I'm planning to just turn it over to you. And if you want to tell us about your course and your work with slow food in whatever way you had planned, just let us know and you can take it over.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I've met everybody that's on the call, and I apologize. I work in the Community Economic and Social Development Department at Algoma U. So Naren and I are the faculty members, although we also have, of course, community and staff and other people that are part of the Living Labs Hub here in the Sioux area. And I'm a board member for Slow Food in Canada, and my role there is liaison of the Arc of Taste. The Arc of Taste is tied to Slow Food International. It's a global movement around trying to document and then afterwards preserve foods, food processes, and food products that are at risk of extinction for a variety of reasons related to globalization and industrialization. So I'm going to start by telling everybody what the Arc of Taste criteria are in terms of what products, processes, or species have to sort of follow to fit the criteria. And then I will talk about the project at length, and you'll just have to remember these criteria in terms of the products and things the students are finding. So the Arc of Taste, and this goes for not just the Arc of Taste in Canada, these are the criteria across the globe for Slow Food International. One, there's 5 criteria. They have to be distinctive in quality in terms of their taste, with taste defined in the context of local traditions and uses. They have to be linked to the memory and identity of a group of people. They have to be environmentally, socially, economically, or historically linked to a specific region, locality, ethnicity, or traditional production practice. They have to be produced in limited quantities, so by farms or small-scale processing companies, artisanal companies, that in ways that are both environmentally and socially sustainable. And they have to be at risk of extinction either biologically or as a culinary tradition. So these are the criteria for things to get on the Arc of Taste, regardless of what country in the world they come from. And so I last fall was going to be teaching a course called Environmental and Community Resilience, which we usually have an action project that the students do independently. But because of my work with Slow Food, I decided that this particular year, I would change their final large assignment up to be an assignment that took in this Arc of Taste project, so that they were working experientially from a arm's length with Slow Food Canada through me, and then actually also Slow Food International. So that's a little bit of the background. And now I'll talk, I'll just sort of go through a paper that I've written and talk about a few points from it. Because my background also in terms of my PhD is in adult education and community development, I spend a lot of my research time not just in food, but in issues around equity and access in education, adult education pedagogy. And so one of the things that, I've been trying to balance in the last many years is between a constructivist approach and a prescriptive approach. So balancing, in assignments, the freedom for self-determination with students as well as self-direction as adult learners, because of course a lot of these students come into the classroom with so much already, particularly when we have students in CSD who are taking classes like the environmental resilience class. We have to find the classroom is full of activists who've already been working out in their communities for a long time, which adds a wonderful dimension to these courses. So that's sort of one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of changing the assignment, and hoping that through this assignment, we could really look at those dominant discourses and critical analysis around social construction, particularly around environmental issues, androcentrism, ethnocentrism, etc. So that was sort of my thinking as I got into it. So the research that was conducted by the students was either primary and or secondary level research on biodiverse foods within Ontario, primarily Northern Ontario, but because we do have a lot of transfer students in our program, some students chose to work with communities that were closer to Southern Ontario because those were communities that they had already been working with, particularly in an activist role for some years. So the research had to go through the university's research ethics committee. That was like an umbrella REB that I did as the instructor, so that I was supervising the students. And as I said, it was tied to Slow Food in Canada and Slow Food International's Arc of Taste. In terms of the assignments, I would have to vet all of their candidates for the ARC once they sent in their final assignment, before moving it on to Slow Food in Canada and Slow Food International. So there was some work to be done even after the course was finished. Now, in terms of the course itself, the students had to start off by doing a certificate online to ensure that they had worked on ethics behind research. We also had an Indigenous scholar that came into the classroom who talked about working with community. They had to read a few other Indigenous protocols, research protocols, as well as doing that TCPC, the Tri-Core Policy Ethical Conducts course certificate. When the Indigenous scholar Elizabeth Edgar-Webkamigad, who is actually the other member of our Living Labs group here in terms of Algoma U staff, she came in and she showed the students how to make tobacco ties, how you would use them, how you would approach community members, because some of our students in the class were Indigenous students, others are settler background, but were potentially some of them interested in working with Indigenous community on this particular project. And in fact, a few did end up working with Elizabeth and her family in her community. Now, the other thing that we wanted to really concentrate on related to the project were some of what we call CSD principles. Now, these are loosely based principles, but I'm going to go through them just quickly here because it also helps to sort of frame how students needed to approach the work. We really look at working in an asset-based lens in terms of processes and models, looking at strengths, building on that capacity that already exists in community, sustainable development, of course, future focus, not going to harm future generations. I'm just going through these really briefly, sorry. Ethical considerations, so really looking at what we're doing, why we're doing it, and if there's any chance of harm, rethinking it. particularly if they were working in communities that they weren't already knowledgeable of and they were having to build relationships for the first time. Respect for local knowledge. This is really important related to biodiverse foods that were coming from specific communities and the knowledge that was tied to that, those foods. Respect for relationships, again, really thinking about how we all share space here in Canada and what that means, particularly related to things like reconciliation. Examining and overcoming barriers to participation. So again, how to work with people in community in ways that are going to not marginalize people. And critical reflection, of course, as they went through their project. So as students began to do their research, either secondary or many of the students did decide on doing primary research, you know, they often would come and pop into my office and talk about things like the principles, the CSD principles, and the ethics and the research that they were doing in terms of how they were approaching community, how community was reacting, how individuals in the community were really excited about the work they were doing and were more than willing to share information. Most students were, at the same time that they seemed excited, they also were at times a bit anxious about being able to find 5 different candidates, because that was the requirement of their assignment, that they had to find five that fit this criteria for the Arc of Taste. For some students, it really ignited a bit of a passion. I had more than a few students who, at the end, in the reflective part of their final assignment, talked about how, had they not done this assignment, they never would have gotten to know that side of their grandma or their grandpa or their community members, because they had never really talked about food and traditions in this way before. And more than half a dozen of the students in the class were now learning from those people that they had done primary research with, so that the skills were going to be passed on. So these were some pretty exciting parts of this assignment. In the end, we had close to 100 different candidates for the ARC. I think there were about 87 when we got rid of duplications between students. And of that, close to 30 look like they are likely going to be candidates. So when I put this through to Slow Food International, so because once the students were finished, and of course they had to sign consents for publication and consents to share information and be a part of the ongoing project outside of the class-based portion. When we sent it on to Slow Food International, it did come back that at least 30 of the candidates, with a little bit more work, will likely make the Arc of Taste here in Canada. And because of a bit of money from this Living Labs project, as well as some startup funds I had from my latest contract, I had a research assistant who is actually still working with me now virtually from her own home. And we're doing some more of the background research on a few of the candidates, because for some, we might need a little bit more on the history or maybe how they're tied to a specific place or a specific group of people before they can be published. So beyond publishing on the website, we're hoping to also, and we're working on a document that will be published through NORDIK Institute here at Algoma University, because I'm a faculty-affiliated researcher with NORDIK as well. So we'll also put out a publication on all of them, regardless of if they made the ARC or not, as well as putting a notice in on which ones actually became an ARC candidate. Beyond that, I think some of the things that were really important for me was looking at this kind of curricular development for adult education in terms of transformational learning, because for some students, they really did have perceptual changes and behavioral changes in terms of doing things differently in the future, skill development that they're going to now move forward as tied to intergenerational knowledge transfer. And that was really important, particularly in this, I felt, in communities that, in students who were part of Indigenous communities, for example, but yet had not had those conversations, had not done those learnings, and how really excited their community members were to demonstrate and to show them when they did show some interest. So that was a really exciting part of the project for myself. The students also did a poster presentation at Algoma University in the foyer at the end of the term, so that staff, faculty, and students from the university could come through. We had about a 3-hour time frame in the afternoon. They had their poster displays up, and we had a lot of people come through and talk to them about not only what is slow food and what is the arc of taste, but what were their specific candidates and what was so important about these, and carrying them on and making sure that they aren't forgotten and that these skills do carry on into the future. It really showed for me also related to the cultural and collective memory that can sort of continue to be regenerated and perpetuated through those knowledge transfers. So that was, what we did. In terms of what's happening still related to this, there are a few things. One, the research, as I mentioned, is still ongoing with the research assistant, in part due to Living Labs, which was great. The publication will be coming out sometime in the next 6 months through NORDIK. But also, another thing that's very exciting is that now, of course, this depends on COVID, but I don't know how many of you are familiar with Terra Madre, which is a Slow Food International event that happens biannually in Italy, and it usually brings in about 250,000 people. It's very grassroots movement around food and food biodiversity, and at this point, well, a few months ago, before COVID hit, we were planning to take a group of 6 to 12 students to Terra Madre. We were also potentially going to have some funding through Slow Food International if they went as delegates. Now, the last I heard, Slow Food International is still planning to have Terra Madre, and the agenda should come out in June. If this all happens and the university and the countries let up travel restrictions and things change, we may still be able to go. But, it's less than 50-50 at this point, I think, because of COVID. But we are still tentatively planning just in case things change and we can. And so what would happen is we would first and foremost, I'd put a call out to the students that were in the class that had done the project. And about 6 of those students are very interested in going to Terra Madre as a class. And then we would also open it up if there are a handful of other students at the university who are interested in food and biodiversity and cultural traditions around food. And we'll take them the experiential learning. Staff member at Algoma University would go, and I would be the faculty lead that would go. And that's something that we're hoping to do in October, but again, it's pretty iffy right now because of COVID, so we'll see. If not, hopefully in the next year or two, we'll be able to catch the next one and do the same thing. I think that's the project in a nutshell. I don't know if anybody wants me to explain anything in more detail or has questions for me at this time. I think I've talked to for at least 10 minutes. So.
Yeah, that was great, Laura. Thank you so much. We have about 25 minutes left, so now would be an excellent opportunity for people to ask questions. I have a couple of pure logistical questions that aren't really probably discussion based, but and you might have said this, but I was writing down names of people attending, so I might have missed it. What level are these students at? Age? It sounded like they were adult learners, but I'm just wondering, are they grad level, undergrad? I think you mentioned some of this, but I missed a little bit of it. Could you just run through that one more time?
Yeah, no, I didn't actually mention it because Algoma University is an undergraduate university at this point. We do have a few, I think, potential graduate programs that hopefully will happen in the next few years, but they're still in development. So this is actually a second-year course.
Okay.
So having students in a second-year undergraduate course do primary research, particularly if they hadn't already done the research methods course, was something that I was, a little hesitant about, but I also have great faith in our students. And, we had an entire class where we talked about ethics. They had to do the certificate. We had an Indigenous scholar come in after that. They had to do other readings. And then both the Indigenous scholar, Elizabeth, and I were also available, at any time for consultation with the students around their work. Now, because most of the students were tied directly through family or through years of activism to the communities that they worked with, there weren't too many concerns. And the one student who, was a settler background student who was working with a community that was a new Indigenous community to himself, was working through Elizabeth and her family. So again, there was a lot of supports in place and check-ins around these students in second year doing primary level research.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask? Oh, Jonathan, I see you just unmuted yourself.
I did have a question. So say if a community group or a garden wants to take on a plant as to support the movement, what are some examples of foods that could be utilized, say, in our garden?
So because it can be a species, a process, or a product, students came up with everything from, ice creams that were made out of seal blubber and berries to actual plants. So Jonathan, for example, you mentioned the sunchokes, I think, in one conversation or email we had. Sunchokes would be a good example of one that would make the Arc of Taste. Others are different kinds of berries that are indigenous to Canada, so blueberries, cranberries would be other examples. Tree examples, maybe butternut, or processes like maple syrup, birch syrup. These types of things are products and processes that could go onto the Arc. And so whenever it's a species, that's a plant species, like the few I mentioned, those certainly could count.
Mm-hmm. I want to maybe make a comment, but I think I have a question, but I had kids coming in during your talk asking me questions. So you may have spoken to some of this already. So apologies if I'm repeating what you already said. But I guess my comment, first off, it just sounds like a fantastic initiative, of course. Like it's, I think when I think about the value of connecting some of the kind of core learning goals you have for your students, and then with the kind of some of the place you're living in, and some of the local context, and some of the politics and the history with this movement that has, accomplished so much on a global scale. And then kind of seeing, like, just the way you've described it, it really sounds like the students have the opportunity to kind of immerse themselves in some of these local issues and local questions and local cultures, but also to connect with, through the Arc of Taste, through some of these bigger issues. And I remember, actually, I was just thinking in one of my PhD classes, we read the biography, like the history of slow food. There was what's his name? Carlo, I want to say Carlo Petrini, or
Yeah, it might be Petrini, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote a great book, and it's a beautiful book because it kind of tells this story of kind of he was a fairly radical activist in his day, and part of his vision of slow food was around kind of finding some really practical and concrete ways to bring a lot of bigger issues together. Anyways, my question, I guess what I'm wondering is, in terms of your own kind of reflection on this whole process, have you had the chance, I guess, on the one hand, to kind of document some of what you've done? Because I mean, the everything you've explained is just, I find so interesting, and I'd love to, I don't know, I'd love to like read more about it or hear more about it. And maybe that's something we should be doing, we could help with, if you haven't already. But so one is, have you documented? And two, I guess the question is, I'm wondering if you've had a chance, and maybe you're in the middle of it, so you haven't done this yet, but evaluate kind of the process, and kind of like, I'd be interested to know almost if the students were, like, how much they got out of this. Like, I feel like I've just gotten so much out of your 10-minute description. I'm wondering if the students kind of were able to kind of see all these connections and everything, or if they were just very focused on the local stuff, or if you already, I don't know, maybe just give a sense of that at this point.
Sure. So there's, I think, at least three different things I'd like to respond. One is, after this all happened, I actually wrote a paper called Collective and Cultural Memory Engagement Through Intergenerational Knowledge Transfer for Transformative Learning in Undergraduate Ecoeducation. And I was supposed to present this at an environmental forum in Hanoi in Vietnam in March. But of course, that got first postponed and then canceled. And it was also going to be part of the panel that many of us were going to sit on at the CTU conference, where I was going to talk specifically about it related to community-based research, and how sometimes community-based research is, not university to agency, but sometimes university to individuals within community, because each of these students were very much involved in community, but yet it wasn't one place. And so it's like the different ways we can even think about community-based research sometimes. sometimes in terms of what is it really and what can it look like. So that's one point. And in the paper, like I do document a lot of my own observations of the students and their comments and their reflections around, this, a few ideas like transformative learning and cultural and collective memory engagement related to intergenerational knowledge transfer and how important these things were, because in some ways this assignment was in some ways really, really complicated for them to get their heads around, because we were tying it back to so many course concepts around community and environmental resilience. So I don't know if any of you use or are familiar with the eco-justice education text, but it's one that we use in that course. And so not only were they tying it back to, conversations we were having around slow food, but they were also tying it back to, this is by Martuzowicz, Edmondson, and Lupinati, 2011, Eco-Justice Education Towards Diverse, Democratic, and Sustainable Communities. That's our required text for that course. So we were also having in there, because this was a synthesis assignment, not only did they have to talk about each of their 5 candidates and how they met the criteria, but they had to tie it back to these course concepts through this text and lectures we were doing, as well as a reflective piece. So that gave me a lot to be able to analyze later in terms of what their learning was and how they could make those connections to the small issues like how do you make pierogies, to how do you work with community, to how in the world is this community and environmental resilience. How is making pierogies environmental resilience? And so they did really understand it. The other thing that I found was really fascinating is that some students, as I mentioned, were working with their 65-year-old grandma who'd gone out and, just shot a moose, and they're learning how to stuff a moose heart for the first time ever. And things like that they had never talked with their family about before, let alone worked through it and cooked through it and learned the processes. So, it was really, for some students, they literally, said thank you at the end, like, I never would have got to this level of depth with my relations had we not done this course. This course made me reach out in that way. But yet for other students, the assignment was really anxiety-provoking, even though in the end they realized it was actually pretty simple to just find, 5 species or 5 types of food that fit these criteria. But it was the process of getting there for some students that was quite difficult. And so, I think there was a varied response. Some of the students loved the assignment, and others were very glad to be done it because they felt it was very stressful as a second-year assignment. So that's the publishing, and that is the students. I think Charles, was there anything else that did I not answer there?
No, I think that, I have lots more questions, but I think in general it's interesting. Just as you were talking, I was just thinking a bit about the, like, I don't know if you're as familiar, I'm sure you are, with the, like, Gibson Graham, some of the community economies literature, and just the way that, I think on the surface, a lot of, sometimes we dismiss a lot of this work as, just being, not what you're talking about, but just generally, like, as being frivolous, or, it's just self-serving. But I think, part of what you're talking about is really, it's showing the way that, like, a lot of this work, which, it's clearly not simple, but can really disrupt kind of regular the ways of doing things. And, the learnings that come out of that is just so valuable. And, more so than getting them to read some, like, heavy political economy text or something. I mean, they're kind of experiencing it and Anyways,
and
great.
that was the exciting point. It was the exciting point when, and it wasn't every student, but when students made all of those connections, and you could see the connections, like, sparking up around them as they talked about it, and some of them, how passionate they got about it. I mean, I had one student who was talking about, how TAMSA was made in Tibetan communities versus Tibetan communities here in the Toronto area, because she'd worked with these communities for years. And so another thing was looking at, like, the diaspora and, how foods change related to immigration and disruption globally, and how, again, how is that resilience in terms of, yeah, now they have to make it on a stove, and they don't use the, waterfalls with the water mill below it, but they've still found a way to make that food so they can still carry on their traditions in some way. And so it was really exciting to have students even themselves talk through, look at how they can still do this, and how this keeps their community together, because food is so important.
Awesome.
Great. Are there any other questions from other folks on the call?
Laura, it's Lindsay here for also in Thunder Bay right now. I just wanted to say, congratulations and great job. It's so hard. I think you must be really brave. It can be really challenging to do this kind of work in the context of our classes and in our institutions, which at times are not supportive of it or don't see the value, but you've clearly shown how impactful this can be. And it's really wonderful to see that and hear it. So anyway, I just think it was so wonderful to hear that today. I needed a little bit of inspiration in my life today, so it was wonderful to hear. So thank you.
Welcome. I think a really important part of it for me was having the students do the poster presentation in the foyer, because this is the kind of work that often goes unseen and uncounted. And so for me, that was my own little protest of the institution in a sense, even though, I'm supported. They've given me startup funds. I have a research assistant now that's helping with this project because of it. But at the same time, we really wanted to have it out in the middle of the foyer so people would have to walk through. And a lot of people then did stop and did get excited about it. So I think it's sometimes we have to also do that extra push to make things visible.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, I just finished a photo voice process in the context of one of my courses, and it sort of ended in a funny way because of COVID. We had plans to share that in the institution in some way and to identify how to do that as a group. But, maybe I'll just connect again with some of those students and say, even though COVID's happening, is there a way we can share some of these outputs? Because there were some nice examples of we were exploring climate change and impacts on youth in particular. But anyway, so you've given me a little bit of inspiration to sort of perhaps push that forward too. So thanks again for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a side note, I do know that some thesis presentations are happening via online calls, so there's still ways to disseminate all the presentations and stuff. But yeah, as students, especially in CSD and at Algoma U, we'd like to take up space, no matter how we do it or how loud we are. We'd like to do that.
What is CSC?
Oh, well,
Community economic.
yeah, community, economic, and social development.
Okay.
Jonathan's a graduate of the program, so he knows well, and he's one of the people that still continues to help us agitate around the place.
Great. We still have about 8 minutes for other questions. I have another more simple one. It's just how many students were in the course, and how many students do you think you could manage through these projects? I don't know if they're working in teams or individually, but I guess I'm just wondering what size of student populations you're working with here.
So this particular Algoma University classes are usually pretty small, 15 to 30 is average. This class had 22 students, 20 or 19 of who were in Sault Ste. Marie on the campus, and 3 who were in Timmins. So that meant that classes were video conferenced each week. So we are in a classroom that also has cameras, microphones, and screens. That's pretty standard in terms of the delivery for a lot of our courses when they get to our Timmins, like when we hold them also on the Timmins campus, they're often video conference. So there were 22 students. So I had to work across distance with a few of them, which makes that piece is a little harder because it's really easy to have a question period in the class at the end of class where any students who want to hang about can stay behind and problem solve or troubleshoot if they're coming up against walls or they're not sure how to approach something or someone. So I'd have to make extra time for the Timmins students outside of class time for that, or have like rounds occasionally where we'd start with the Timmins group and then they could leave and then others could stay in the classroom that's like in person and get their questions answered. So logistically, it was a little bit harder because of the two sites, but it's pretty normal for CSD courses. We almost always have students from Timmins in our courses, so as faculty, we're pretty used to that. And you know, I easily could have had up to 50 students in that class because you're working with them individually. It's really the work after the course is over in terms of taking what they have. I mean, it's one thing to mark a course assignment, but then now putting it into a publication, doing background research when more research is needed in certain areas. And that's the work that's been ongoing the last few months with the research assistant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I have to say, it was probably the most fun I've had at the university yet. And I've been working there on and off, part-time and contractually, since 2012. I absolutely loved this. I loved how the students reacted, and it's nice that, you know, hopefully we'll be able to continue on and even do more work. And I really am hoping, you know, that the Terra Madre event can happen because it just ties them into this global movement if they get to go. So we'll see, but even if not, it was worthwhile.
That's awesome. That's great. Lindsay gave you a thumbs up on Zoom that you can't see, so I'll tell you that she gave you that. Fantastic. Before we lose anyone, I meant to say this at the beginning, and I'm sorry, I forgot. I did record this session, and so if folks are okay with that, I'll just post it on our website, which is not heavily trafficked, I'll say, but it allows other members of Living Labs Network to then view this after the fact. And so if you're not okay with that, maybe send me an email or let me know in the chat box, but otherwise I'll post this recording later today just so others can see it. And yeah, I just wanted to.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Any final questions here? Other we can wrap up a few minutes early. That's not a terrible thing for any of us, but any last questions or comments?
Maybe just, I have one other question. I have lots of questions, but one quick one maybe is, I'm just wondering, Laura, if you got, and again, apologies if you answered this already, but if you got any support or from Slow Food Canada to kind of develop this, and yeah, just how kind of what you're doing is tied into kind of the, yeah, I guess the movement in Canada, beyond, and even internationally, without beyond just going to the Terra Madre.
Yeah. So because I'm the liaison for the Architaste for Slow Food Canada, and I work with the Canadian Commissioner, so that is another person here in Canada who links directly to Slow Food International. So up until about a year ago, she did a lot of the work on the Arc of Taste alone, and then now at this point, I help and support her. So in the months prior to, as I was developing the project, I had some conversations with, her name's Carrie McDermott Knight, and talked about, you know, I had certain work that I would do as the professor in the class, but then in terms of taking this forward, how would we do it? And so what we had to come up with as a plan was that after I marked them, I would then also do a little bit more in terms of, like with the research assistant around grammar and referencing and that kind of thing, and then I would send it to her and send it to Charles at Slow Food International, who sort of oversees the ARC for, you know, in terms of the global project for Slow Food International. So he and Eliza, who is Slow Food International's, she's a country liaison, she's out of Italy as well, as is Charles. And so I was working with the two of them in terms of how we would stage this from the classroom to the work Carrie and I do in terms of vetting products here for Canada, and then it always has to go through Slow Food International sort of as the final say before things get put up on the website. And so we all worked together in terms of sort of the plan, in terms of what would happen after the course. And we're still in the middle of that. Like Carrie and I are still bouncing things back and forth with Charles as we, you know, eventually we'll get to a point where things can actually be formalized and they can get up on the website, and then I can move on to the other publication after that. And Eliza was also the one who, would send out the application for Terra Madre for the students so that they may be delegates. Now we're still waiting to hear on all of this. And if not, then we would work through the experiential learning hub at the university. So there was a bit of that, although it was driven by me and mostly asking questions of them in terms of how it will work so that it wouldn't be too much work for them. And it was mostly on, first myself and then Carrie, and then from there to Charles in Italy.
Very, very cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
So can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, this is Liz. Hey, Laura, thanks for sharing the awesome experience that we had at Algoma. I'm the Elizabeth that she was talking about that came into the classroom and talked about some of the ways that we approach learning, gathering of information, aka research, in our local First Nation communities. And in particular in my family, one of the students, Darren, was able to connect with my husband, and we had a great conversation after my visit in the classroom. Him and I met up and talked, and then I connected him to my husband, who's a hunter-gatherer for our family, for our community. And they were able to share some information, and then watching and looking, really right through the whole process, I guess you could say, with the final presentation in the foyer at Algoma University, you could see how widely supported something like that is, not only, as Jonathan indicated, among students. Students are very good at rallying each other and supporting each other and so on in our small institution. And then, of course, as Laura indicated, some of our colleagues standing right there, Naren, who's on the call, being one of them. It was something I found really, really pleasant, I guess you could say, to experience, witness, and totally affirm what Laura's talking about here. It would be nice to see these kinds of things happen more and more. Really, kind of like in my community, because of how I was born, raised, and so on, even though we traveled all over the place, systemic thinking and connectedness, I guess, and so relying on each other for that knowledge transfer, pulling together for resource sharing, all that kind of stuff really made a lot of sense. So it was nice to see, nice to be a part of, and it was really nice to hear from start to finish, Laura. So job well done. And I hope that the students get a chance to continue doing an assignment like that. I think it was really valuable from my perspective, kind of as an outsider, but also as one of the local partners that helps support those kinds of initiatives. So, and it's nice to see some of you in person. Charles, I don't think I've seen you yet, but I've conversed with you a couple of times through emails and so on. So sharing with you my view, I am sitting at Bellevue Park. This is my office view for the moment. I discovered we had some leftover cookies, so we brought them down for the seagulls and geese, and it's a beautiful day. People are walking, and gives me a sense of hope, I guess you could say, for overcoming this current situation that we're all a part of. So best wishes and thanks.
Thanks, Liz. It's nice to see your face. I send a lot of emails to the whole group, so it's nice to also meet you a little bit online.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, well, that sounds like a real uplifting note for us to end on. Thank you, Liz, for voicing that. Thanks for attending, everybody. And if you have more questions, I'm sure you can reach out to Laura over email. And our next mini meetup, sorry, I was not prepared to say this. We have one more planned for May 21st. It's another Thursday. The next one is at 2 o'clock. We have not nailed down who will present. So if you're feeling inspired to share a little bit and engage in something, please let me know. I'd happy to get you on the schedule for that day. And otherwise, feel free to attend if you're able. That'd be awesome. And enjoy the rest of your week this week.
Amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Have a good day. Stay safe.